By the winter of 1932, Germany was no longer a functioning democracy in any meaningful sense. The Reichstag existed, but it barely governed. Laws were not passed by debate and consensus, but by emergency decree signed by an aging president who ruled more by habit than conviction. Economic misery, mass unemployment, and political extremism had hollowed out the Weimar Republic from the inside. The question was no longer whether the system would collapse, it was who would replace it. Calls were growing louder for the Reichstag to be dissolved and for new national elections to be held. On the nationalist right, the German National People's Party, the DNVP, openly opposed extending President Paul von Hindenburg's term in office. Their leader, Alfred Hugenberg, saw an opportunity to reshape Germany's future by force of politics rather than patience. On January 12, 1932, Adolf Hitler added his voice to the controversy. In a carefully worded letter to Chancellor Heinrich Brüning, Hitler declared that despite his great personal respect for the Reich president, he could not support an extension of Hindenburg's term. He cited constitutional concerns and accused Brüning of pressuring the president to violate the law. It sounded principled. It was not. Hitler's real reason was far simpler and far more dangerous. He was considering running for president himself, but there was a problem so fundamental that it threatened to end the idea before it began. Adolf Hitler was not a German citizen. Adolf Hitler was not a German citizen. Since 1925, after renouncing his Austrian citizenship, Hitler had been legally stateless. For years, this had not mattered. He could lead a party, command loyalty, dominate the streets, but the presidency of Germany required citizenship. Without it, Hitler's ambitions stopped at the door of the Constitution. Or so it seemed. German law contained a technical loophole. Appointment to a government post at either the Reich or state level automatically granted German citizenship. Hitler needed only one thing, a political ally willing to bend the system. He found one in the small state of Brunswick. There, Nazi politician Dietrich Klages served as Minister of the Interior. On February 25, 1932, Klages appointed Hitler to a minor government position as a state councillor in Berlin. The job itself was meaningless. The consequence was not. With a single signature, Adolf Hitler became a German citizen. He was now legally eligible to run for president of Germany. Hitler did not want just any office. He wanted the highest one. But presidential campaigns required enormous sums of money, millions of Reichsmarks, and that meant winning over Germany's most powerful industrialists, men who had long viewed the Nazi Party with suspicion. Many business leaders feared the party's earlier flirtations with socialism. In 1930, the Nazi movement had nearly torn itself apart. Gregor Strasser and his supporters had pushed a radical, anti-capitalist version of National Socialism, one that terrified industrial elites, though Hitler ultimately crushed Strasser's faction and elevated Joseph Goebbels as propaganda chief. The memory lingered. Trust would not come easily. In January 1932, before he even became a citizen, Hitler made his move. He addressed the industry club at the Park Hotel in Dusseldorf, in the heart of Germany's industrial Ruhr region. Nearly 800 influential businessmen attended, invited by steel magnate Fritz Thyssen, one of Hitler's early supporters. Hitler spoke calmly, strategically. He argued that true democracy did not mean rule by the majority, but leadership by the capable. Businessmen, he said, were among the nation's natural elite. Private property, he assured them, was morally justified by inequality of talent and achievement. The crisis facing Germany, Hitler claimed, was not only economic, it was political. Parliament had failed. Emergency decrees could not save the nation. Only a strong state led by decisive authority could restore prosperity. National Socialism, he promised, rejected democracy and internationalism in favor of responsibility, command, and obedience. Communism would be destroyed. Free enterprise would survive under protection. The message landed. The speech dramatically improved Hitler's standing in business circles. Financial support followed. Equally important, Hitler gained legitimacy. He was no longer just a street agitator. He was a statesman in waiting. At the same time, Chancellor Brüning's position continued to erode. His popularity collapsed. President Hindenburg's behind-the-scenes advisor, Kurt von Schleicher, increasingly questioned Brüning's competence. Brüning attempted to rescue his standing through foreign policy. In February, he traveled to Geneva for the World Disarmament Conference, hoping to secure international recognition of Germany's right to rearm parity with other powers. France immediately objected, viewing the demand as a veiled attempt to undermine the Treaty of Versailles. Negotiations stalled. Brüning returned home empty-handed. Days later, the Nazis and the DNVP attempted once again to topple his government with a vote of no confidence. Brüning survived barely, thanks only to social democratic support. The irony was bitter. The left propped up a chancellor to prevent the far right from seizing power. The presidential election timetable was finalized. The first round would take place on March 13, 1932, a runoff, if needed, on April 10th. Hindenburg reluctantly agreed to run again. At 84 years old, he was frail, distant, and increasingly out of touch. Yet he remained a symbol, Germany's greatest World War I hero. Political parties of the center and left refused to run candidates against him, fearing that splitting the vote would hand victory to Hitler. Hitler, meanwhile, understood reality. He knew he could not defeat Hindenburg outright. But that was not the goal. The goal was visibility, legitimacy, momentum. Joseph Goebbels framed the election as a battle between National Socialism and the Weimar system itself. Millions of leaflets flooded the streets. Thousands of billboards appeared. Records of Hitler's were distributed by the tens of thousands. From March 1 to March 11, Hitler spoke in 12 cities to crowds totaling 500,000 people. He blamed Germany's misery on 13 wasted years of democratic chaos, engineered by the November criminals. He avoided direct attacks on Hindenburg, praising his service while portraying him as a puppet of failed politicians. On March 13, 1932, turnout reached an astonishing 86.2%. Hindenburg won, but not enough. He received 49.54% of the vote. Hitler came second with over 11 million votes. The runoff was inevitable. Germany held its breath. The Constitution still stood, but the future was no longer uncertain. It was approaching fast. Were distributed by the tens of thousands. From March 1 to March 11, Hitler spoke in 12 cities to crowds totaling 500,000 people. He blamed Germany's misery on 13 wasted years of democratic chaos, engineered by the November criminals. He avoided direct attacks on Hindenburg, praising his service while portraying him as a puppet of failed politicians. On March 13, 1932, turnout reached an astonishing 86.2%. Hindenburg won, but not enough. He received 49.54% of the vote. Hitler came second with over 11 million votes. The runoff was inevitable. Germany held its breath. The Constitution still stood, but the future was no longer uncertain. It was approaching fast.